archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
We welcome you to our program. Welcome to Studio One.
Today we have in our midst one of the greatest living musician of contemporary India, the living legend, Sarod Maestro, Ustad Amjad Ali Khan. Khan Sahab is the son and disciple of the illustrious Ustad Hafiz Ali Khan, and he represents the sixth generation of his very illustrious lineage of Sainya Bangash Gharana. So Khan Sahab, please tell us something about the Sainya Bangash Gharana, because Gharanas, as we all know, play a very important role in the presentation of music of our country.
I am very fortunate that I was born in the family of musicians. So, Gharana is a very important word in North Indian classical music. But the other meaning of Gharana is a limitation, that you can only do this much. So, everything is limited. No Gharana is unlimited. So, it is entirely up to God that somebody might become a versatile. But I was very fortunate because my father was my guru. And in Gwalior, in that ancestral house I was born, which is now converted into a museum called Sarod Ghar. So all the time, all my elder brothers, uncles, they were all teaching me, guiding me all the time. Because my father was very busy artist. I think he was the most busy musician of his time. And he used to be away from Gwalior. So he had appointed a Tabla teacher for me, a vocalist for me. They used to come home, they were very kind. And I learned vocal music from Pandit N.L. Gune. And Tabla player was Pandit Raghuvar Prasad ji. He was also a Khandani Gharanedar Tabla player. Sainya, the word Sainya is connected with Mia Tansen. My father and Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab, they both were called Sainya Gharana because they learned from the vansh of Mia Tansen, and there was a legendary guru, Ustad Muhammad Wazir Khan Sahab, who taught music because he was not a sarod player, he was a knowledgeable guru and he could play Rudrabeen. So he taught my father and Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab also. The guru of Mia Tansen was Swami Haridas ji. So that is why we often go to Mathura, Vrindavan to pay our homage there. And Tansen's grave is in Gwalior. So once upon a time, Gwalior was a capital town of music. Now it is more committed and dedicated to politics.
Khan Sahab, there are a lot of aspiring musicians. I see youngsters here. What goes into the making of a good musician?
You see, it all depends on the time. The time keeps changing because the old generation, the generation of my father, that was very, very old. He could have been my grandfather because I was the youngest child. Ji. His contemporaries were Ustad Fayaz Khan Sahab, Ustad Abdul Karim Khan Sahab, Ustad Inayat Khan Sahab, Ustad Alauddin Khan Sahab. So those musicians, especially my father, often told me, "Ek sadhe sab sadhe aur sab sadhe sab jaye." In one lifetime you can't do everything. So he was very clear about this, that if you spend time in books, you will lose something in music. That was their belief. And that is why in Gwalior there is a very big school, Sindhya school. All the royalties and rich people, children are there. So as a young boy, I went with my father to Sindhya school for a performance. And the principal, Mr. Shukla at that time, requested my father to admit me in that Sindhya school. So my father replied, if he lives here in a boarding, who will play Sarod there? And how can he play Sarod? So that was his way of teaching and his beliefs that या तो स्वर को समझ लो या साहित्य को समझ लो. दोनों को एक साथ जो समझता है, वहाँ कुछ ना कुछ कमी रह जाती है. I believe if God is kind, a PhD also can be a great musician. This is what I feel. But the old people, old timers like my father, he had a strong feeling that if you want to be a musician, you must understand the depth of sound. What is sound? Swar hi Ishwar hai. Sound and rhythm. There are two oceans. The ocean of sound, ocean of rhythm. We just understand a little bit, but they are ocean. So my father didn't believe this school training, children go to school. Nobody was in my family who went to school. All trying music. So teachers used to come to the house, and then finally when I came to Delhi, then people persuaded my father and made him understand how important is school and education. So after coming to Delhi, then for a few years I was in school, modern school of Delhi. And because of that school, today I can face the world. but I couldn't complete the school because the people of India, they were so kind and encouraging that from the age of 12, they started inviting me to Calcutta, Chennai, Hyderabad, Nagpur, Kanpur, Allahabad, Banaras. So I couldn't complete the schools. But principal was very kind, my school principal, Mr. Amin Kapoor. My mathematics was very bad, very poor. I could not understand mathematics on the paper, but I could understand mathematics and music. Mathematics in the air, calculation. So my father once came to school and spoke to the principal, okay, Mr. Kapoor, how to help him? He's very bad in mathematics. Kapoor साहब replied, my father, खान साहब ये कभी मैथमेटिक्स में पास नहीं करेंगे और मैं इनको कभी फेल नहीं करूँगा क्योंकि मुझे पता है इनको सरोद बजाना है. You know, he was an institution. How, I don't think any principal can answer this kind of situation. So the point is that their beliefs were different. In one lifetime, one should be very clear what you want to do.
Khasa, your childhood seems very interesting. So, what was it like? How many hours would you spend doing riyaz, and was there time for play or other activities?
You see, I couldn't enjoy my childhood actually because of family tradition and the responsibilities also. Because my father tried on every member of my family that they should carry on the tradition, they should become musicians, my brother, my uncle, my everybody. So I was the last unexpected child in the family, and they all told me, now it is your duty, it is your responsibility. You know, the day child becomes responsible, that is the best day for the parents. So I became bread earner for the family. Whatever I used to get money from my concerts, I used to give it to my mother. And this is the way. So I realized my responsibility. Yes, practice was all the time there. And the more I realized, more I was listening, Sarod around me, I was practicing. So hard work is most important.
You said you started giving public performances by the age of 12 and 13?
Yes, yes.
And you received your first award at the age of 14.
Yes, that was encouragement, that was blessings from Allahabad.
Yes, because today you've been honored with awards and doctorates from all over the world. But what was it like receiving your first award at that time?
You see, a music institution like Prayag Sangeet Samiti in Allahabad, they were very kind and they invited me in 1959 also, 60. And then finally this Sarod Samrat title Prayag Sangeet Samiti gave me. I mean, that was a big encouragement, big responsibility.
And at the age of 14 that was?
14, and an award from an institution of music, it means a lot. And I think that was a landmark in my life.
You have revolutionized the art of Sarod playing and have given Sarod a new and a timeless interpretation. You've introduced the Ikehra Tans, which have affected the rendition of the Gaiki and the Tantrakariyan. Could you tell us about that?
You see, in every era there were great musicians, in every era there were great Sarod players, sitar players. But from my childhood, I wanted to say slightly different than the rest of the world. I wanted to be more expressive because Sarod is a very difficult instrument. It doesn't have frets like sitar, guitar, mandolin. And to bring out a song on the Sarod was a taboo. Sarod player could play rag, alap, jod, jhala, composition, this and that. But even Vaishnav Janato, I never heard on the Sarod in my lifetime. So I was the first Sarod player who played Vaishnav Janato or Ramdhun. Because it's a challenge to bring out a song on Sarod. I still remember legendary Dilip Kumar, first time when he heard my concert in Bangalore. He was very fond of music, poetry, amazing personality. Interval हुआ, तो he came to green room. और उनके जो अल्फाज हैं, I would like to express that in हिंदुस्तानी. कहले भाई, मैंने सरोद बहुत सुना है, मैं सुनता आ रहा हूँ, लेकिन माशाल्लाह आपने इस साज का ढब बदल दिया, कि उसका कैरेक्टर बदल दिया आपने. तो अब ये इकहरा तान, ये भी एक बड़ा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड वर्ड है. उर्दू का अल्फाज है इकहरा, दोहरा और इकहरा जो अल्फाज है. तो सरोद में सिंगल नोट और डबल स्ट्रोक बजते थे, डिड़े 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 ऐसे. सारे गा मा पा, तो ऐसा डायरेक्ट कहना मुश्किल था इस साज में. सा सा रे रे गा गा मा मा पा ऐसे बजता था. डिड़े 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 डा. तो हम आई यूज्ड टू टेल माय फादर कि सर दिस इज वेरी limited instrument. I feel very frustrated to see that sitar player can play a taan, a sarod player can't produce that. No, beta, it's difficult because it doesn't have frets. So I tried for that sarod should also be expressive, And then how a singer sing. Da ra, da ra, ra. So my father often used to sing. I had to follow. And that is the way I realized the human expressions, how to play human expression on the sarod. सरोद को बजाना एक अलग चीज़ है, बट व्हाट सरोद वांट्स टू से, उसकी खिदमत करते हैं, सरोद के गुलाम हैं हम. All the time I am worried about the mood of my instrument. If I am in a humid climate, I am very worried because humidity is not good for sarod. But sometimes people create an open air concert at the seaside. It becomes very torturous for the instrument. But somehow with modern technology and sound system, we manage. But the ideal situation for my kind of instrument is a closed auditorium.
Khan Sahib, you made some modifications to the instrument and your style of playing with the fingernails instead of tips of fingers, that also
The
affected
fingernail,
the
I
sound?
think every sarod player use the fingernail, but some sarod players, they don't have strong nails. So now they have artificial nails and synthetic nails, so they manage.
How does it affect the sound of the sarod?
You see, sitar is played with fingertip,
Tips.
and sarod, if it is played with fingertip, the sound becomes very dull. So I have to press the string with the edge of my fingernails to bring out that vibrations, and all the more it becomes more difficult. That fingernail doesn't have, there's no width. So if I put fingernail on one particular point, it should be in tune. I think some cosmic powers, somebody is monitoring. So I'm just transmitting everything. But my father, sometimes his nail used to crack. So he will not accept any concert. For 6 months, he used to wait for his nail to grow. Then he will travel. That was the old lifestyle.
Khan Sahib, you've also introduced a lot of new rags. So how did the inspiration come?
It just happens. You see, I don't plan to create a new rag. But sometime a melody comes to me. Like I used to hum one melody. Da ra da 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 ra da ra da da ta no da ra da da ra da da ra da ra yeah ri ra da 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 ra da da ra na da ta no. So I used to keep humming this melody. Then one day I stopped and I felt, what am I singing? What is this? So the melody says, do you recognize me? I said, no. So will you accept me or should I go? So I accept the melody and I give the name. So similarly, this melody I realized technically. Pa da ni sa ni da pa ma ga ma re ga ma ga re sa ni da pa ma pa ni da ni sa re pa ga ma re ga re sa ni sa. So it was something new, a world of Kalyan thought. There are so many Kalyan, but in spite of that, this was something new. In those days, I had to perform in Pune in Ganesh festival. They wanted me to create something new for Lord Ganesha. So I named this rag Ganesh Kalyan. And I played all over the world. So this is the way the melody comes. And I created rag on the occasion of 125th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. The Prime Minister was Mr. Narasimha Rao at that time. So we had all gone to UNESCO, Paris. And the South Indian singer from Chennai, Dr. Bala Murali Krishna, was also there. He also created a new rag. But my rag, I call it Bapu Kos. So as a offering homage to Mahatma Gandhi on his 125th birth anniversary. Da 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 sa ga ma pa ma ga sa ni pa ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ni pa ma ga ma da ni pa ga ma ga ni sa ga. Indian classical music always had a freedom. We don't need more freedom, but freedom within the discipline. So it's a message of Indian classical music to the whole world. that freedom within the discipline. That is healthy, that is constructive, that we maintain the rule of ascending and descending. Sa re ga pa da sa, जाते में 5 सुर लग रहे हैं. सा नि दा पा मा गा रे सा, आते में 7 सुर लग रहे हैं. And we have to maintain this discipline and sing or play Rag Shuddh Kalyan. That is why the whole world, they have very great respect for Indian classical music. That how we improvise within the set rules of ascending and descending.
My name is Vijendra Sajwan. I am working for All India Radio, sir. Sir, today, as you mentioned that while you work and while you go in a car and try to listen to music, do you get to listen to classical music these days? And do you feel that All India Radio is still contributing the same as it used to do earlier? So what is, according to you, the role of All India Radio these days as far as classical Indian music is concerned, sir?
The role is very, very important and it is very, very effective. I think even today, our countrymen, they are more connected to radio than television. But you must choose the kind of artist you are presenting. The public should be interested in those musicians. Public interest is most important. You must present musicians who are popular, whom public has recognized them. Like you are listening to Lata Mangeshkar or Mohammad Rafi or Kishore Kumar. So radio's contribution is very, very important, but you can improve your presentation.
I'm Rajiv Kumar Shukla, who works with All India Radio.
I was just wondering what is your opinion about the orchestra or the many people coming together to create the classics of film music, because there you can say it is of course somebody created the tune, but after that it's a collective performance. So what is your opinion about this aspect of our film music, the collective aspect?
Teamwork in the Bombay film world, many musicians, they used to earn a lot of money, and there was a time in our young days, all the creative people, whether writers, musicians, they were all running towards Mumbai because of the films. And my father was also very worried that I might also leave him and go to Mumbai. But I never needed film world in my life because people of India accepted me and encouraged me from the age of 12. But I used to admire this collective effort in film world. There used to be orchestra, they were great violin player, they were great guitar player, and they used to earn a lot of money, and sitar player, sarod player, everybody was very well off in Bombay because of the films. But from the time this instrument called keyboard was created, a lot of musicians lost their livelihood because keyboard can produce all kind of sounds. Sound of sitar, sound of flute, sound of violin. Thank God, Ravi, Sarod baki hai. But I am sure one day keyboard will produce Sarod also. But it's an amazing creation, whoever has done it. So orchestra was very, very advanced in Bombay. And because Bombay was always a commercial, financial capital of India, so they were very successful. That kind of orchestra we don't have anywhere else. And now the orchestra is over. Now it's keyboard because all the film producer, director, they want to save money and they use keyboard for everything. But human touch in a music has a very positive effect. There is a history that listening to good music, appealing music, plants grow faster or cattle gives more milk. I live in the world of sound. Swari Ishwar, as I've said many times, that I feel connected with God through music.
Represents the 6th generation of his very illustrious lineage of Sainya Bangash Gharana. Khan Sahib, you've also introduced a lot of new rags. So how did the inspiration come?
It just happens. You see, I don't plan to create a new rag. But sometime a melody comes to me. So I used to keep humming this melody. Then one day I stopped and I felt, what am I singing? What is this? So the melody says, do you recognize me? I said, no. So will you accept me or should I go? So I accept the melody and I give the name. And I create a Rag Subbalakshmi. So Rag Subbalakshmi, I first performed in Chennai, in Music Academy. There was 2,500 people. And Pandit Jasraj was also singing before me. And next day was my wife's birthday. So I thought, how can I return what all she has given me, especially 2 sons, 2 more musicians to the world. My wealth is my music. So through music only I can give something to somebody. That is my service, that's my offering. So this melody came to my mind, and final shape was in Chennai. So I played the first piece. Sa, sa, da, da, re, da, 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 sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, 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 re, ga, dha, pa, re, ga, re, sa, sa, da, 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 di, da, 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 Antara? Da, 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 da. Da 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 re ga dha pa re ga re sa da 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 da. So this was the composition of Subbalakshmi.
Khan Sahib, you've been India's cultural ambassador, you've taken classical music around the world, and you've also collaborated with a lot of musicians from the West. Could you tell us some memorable collaborations?
You see, collaboration is a very nice word because now the most common word is fusion. So fusion sometimes creates confusion. I mean, some fusion is appealing, but most of the fusion makes me very uncomfortable. But collaboration is a very nice word. And I still remember I received an invitation from Scottish Chamber Orchestra that I should compose a 45-minute piece for their orchestra. Because every city in America or every city in Europe, they have their own orchestra. The kind of orchestra they create, 150 musicians together, and they give respect to the conductor. When the conductor comes, they all get up and receive. So what I'm trying to say, this cohesiveness, collectiveness, collectively we have to learn. So this is the way, this is the best message the Western world they have. So I was so happy to work with Scottish Chamber Orchestra. I composed the piece and it is called Samagam. Once it is written, then it belongs to their forefathers, the way they play. So professional, so committed, so dedicated. The National Orchestra of France, they invited me for 7 shows in France, and the National Orchestra of France played. Then recently Chicago Philharmonic Orchestra played. So all the orchestras of the world, and they are performing this Samagam. So it is basically Sarod concerto. कभी मैं अकेला होता हूँ, कभी with my sons Aman and हम तीनों सरोद लेकर we sit there, and the big orchestra, sometimes 60 musicians, sometimes 100 musicians. So collectively to produce beautiful piece of music is the greatest challenge. So most of us in India, we are soloist. Everybody wants to play or sing solo. Duet becomes difficult, and sometimes Aman and we all play trio. That becomes even more difficult. But it's interesting too, how we communicate, 3 of us sitting on the stage without saying anything. With the vibration of music, we exchange our eyes and all that.
Your contribution as a musician is very important globally, but you've also played a very vital role as a guru. And you have introduced not only young Sarod artists, but also a lot of new Tabla artists to the musical platform.
Because from my childhood, I was interested in Tabla playing. I used to play Tabla. So anybody who's working hard, anybody who's talented as a Tabla player, I always gave to a lot of Tabla players helping hand, and unknown Tabla players I used to make them play with me. But maximum concerts of my life held with Pandit Kishan Maharaj, with Pandit Shamta Prasad Gudai Maharaj, Ustad Allah Rakha Khan Sahab, Ustad Karamatullah Khan Sahab, Ustad Habibuddin Khan Sahab. So very, very senior Tabla players. Because in olden days, the organizers, they never asked my choice.
Oh, they would just put anybody with you.
They will just say Pandit Kishore Maharaj will play tabla with you. So it was a challenge then.
Today, even some senior tabla artists, when one has to introduce them, they say ki bolo ki we are now under the guidance of Ustad Amjad Ali Khan.
Some accept that who all helped them in their life, and some don't accept. So that shows the background of a person. But I am very happy that I could help many young tabla players who are now famous
I'll go back to your collaborations with other artists. In your book, Maestro and Maestros, you have written about 12 other senior musicians with whom you had a very deep interaction.
Yes.
And you've referred to that in each chapter is dedicated to one such personality.
Yes.
So you've collaborated with them, you've dealt with them, and one could never forget your presentation with Ustad Bismillah Khan, which was magical.
Yeah. Every musician is a great musician because every musician has a right to present the way he wants to present. But these 12 musicians on whom I have written this book, they were the reason of Indian classical music becoming so popular, which includes Pandit Ravi Shankar, Bismillah Khan Sahab, and many others. From the south, I have only included M.S. Subbulakshmi ji because she was the only musician of the south became international and very humble. And all these musicians, I had personal acquaintance. There are so many great musicians. I mean, there should be a book written on all of them. But my wife's name, Subbulakshmi, is because of M.S. Subbulakshmi. Because my in-laws, they saw a film where M.S. Subbulakshmi was the heroine, Meera. And they were so impressed with the role of Meera in that film that when my wife was born, they called her Subbulakshmi. In Hyderabad, some South Indian organization was honoring Sangeet Sagaram Award to M.S. Subbulakshmi and me also. So just two of us were there. And because M.S. Subbulakshmi was very shy, she never used to speak. And I spoke and she was looking at me and I said, I'm very fortunate that I have got two Subbulakshmi in my life. One is in the form of mother and one is my wife. And I must share this with you, maybe in the book on the chapter of M.S. Subbulakshmi I have written, that till the time I met her, I had only heard her name, M.S. Subbulakshmi. So one day I was driving in Delhi, Fiat car, and my radio was on, and South Indian lady singing, that's all. But she was catching my attention while driving. And then I started thinking, could she be M.S. Subbulakshmi? It was so appealing, that music, and I couldn't drive. Then I parked my car and I waited for the announcement. That was her introduction as a musician. And the announcement was that you were listening to M.S. Subbulakshmi. You know, the spiritual effect was so much in her whole lifestyle. And we used to visit in Chennai every time we were in Chennai. And I used to look forward for South Indian coffee. Very spiritual, and she was very keen that I should visit to Shankaracharya in Kanjipuram, Periyar, Chandrasekharendra Swami. So she arranged the car, the whole family, Amanaya and my wife, from her house directly went to Shankaracharya, and she believed that even if he can look at you, that's a Ashirwad. So all the three Shankaracharyas were there. So spirituality was pouring in her lifestyle and her music. We'll always remember her and a great contribution. So there are about 12 musicians.
But I will come back to the Jugalbandis you've had with the others.
Bismillah Khan Sahab.
Bismillah Khan Sahab, and also with Allah Rakha Khan Sahab, with Zakir Bhai.
Bismillah Khan Sahab, the mentor of Shehnai. I mean, Shehnai became popular because of him. And he was very old in Bihar, Patna. Somebody invited both of us for a duet. I accepted. This was 30, 40 years before. And in the evening, it was torrential rain and all the pandal and everything was ruined and we couldn't perform. So after 30, 40 years, we again in Delhi, the Tal Katora Stadium, I went to his hotel for rehearsal. He used to stay near New Delhi station, some favorite hotel of his. So I said, I'll go and do rehearsal with Khan Sahab. So he was lying. I got worried. I said whether he can play or not. So he got up and we discussed verbally and we didn't play. And then Tal Katora Stadium, more than 7,000-8,000 people. And there his whole appearance was so different. He was so lively, and in his young days he was a firework. The kind of Shehnai used to play, my God. And he played duet with most of our Indian musicians, Pandit V.G. Jog and so many others. And it was difficult for me how to interact with a senior, a person who is much older than you. So I was worried that how to play and when not to play, and all those things. That is part of tradition and you're bringing up your culture, sanskar. So it was successful in Delhi.
You established the Ustad Hafiz Ali Khan Memorial Society in 1977.
Ji.
And under that society, you have this Sarod Ghar. You changed your
This is
ancestral
All India
house, you made
Radio
it into a
Archives
museum
recording.
much later.
Yes.
And you also started giving awards to young upcoming talents as well as to established musicians.
My father passed away in 1972, and 73 we had a memorial festival in Calcutta, in Kala Mandir, for 17 days. All the musicians, singer, dancer, performers, they all offered homage to Abba. And then we were rotating festival, and then we were giving awards to all the great musicians. And now Sarod Ghar is there, and sometime award ceremony was held in Gwalior, and we used to invite Prime Minister and presidents from Delhi. So they all came, and many spiritual people came to Sarod Ghar, beside Prime Minister and President.
But tell us about the Sarod Ghar. It's a museum housing instruments of eminent musicians.
I mean, it is interesting for today's younger generation to see that how we lived in that house. I was born in that house, and I could have made money out of that house also. I could have made into a hotel or guest house to earn money. We all need money, but according to Sanskari people, according to Khandani people, certain money is allowed, certain kind of money is allowed, certain kind of money is not allowed. So this is my Diksha Shiksha ki jagah hai. Or by converting it into a museum, it's my Guru Dakshina to my Guru. कि एक यादगार फ़कीरों का टीला, फ़कीरों का घर, संगीतकारों का घर कैसा होता था, कैसे रहते थे, तो एक यादगार है वो, एक मेमोरियल है. This is the museum where there are photographs of all the musicians. What we were talking earlier about Gharana, generally people are restricted to their own father's photo, grandfather's photo. But in this museum you must visit sometime, and I will request you, if you suggest some more photographs, please give the photographs, we'll put it there. So there are photographs of all the performing musician, artist. And similarly the book, generally a musician writes a book on his guru or father or mother. There is no history of any classical musician who talks about others. This is a message to my field also, that we must see the good points in every musician. That used to be my homework as a young boy. कि my father will say कि उस्ताद फैयाज खान साहब की खूबी क्या है वो बताओ, उस्ताद अब्दुल करीम खान साहब की क्या खूबी है वो बताइए. तो वो हमें सुनना पड़ता था. डा डा रा डा रा ना रा ना, अब्दुल करीम खान साहब. डा रा रा ना रा ता नो, da 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 da, yeah 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 yeah. So every musician is an institution, and we have to understand the contribution of Fayaz Khan Sahab, Abdul Karim Khan Sahab. There were so many great musicians. So this book is about 12 musicians. They were trendsetters. They were legends, and they showed a different path, different way of life through music.
You lay a lot of stress on Sanskriti and Sanskar and culture, and you always say a good musician should be a good human being.
Yes.
And those are the values which followed, I see, in your wife and your children. They all follow that. Could you tell our audience here about why you lay so much of stress on being a culturally evolved person, and what Sanskriti and Sanskar mean?
You see, beside music, my father always tried to convey that all of us have a common God, and we are the common race. I wish every priest of every religion should have conveyed this. But unfortunately, every priest, they have their own agenda, and they only talk whatever is in their agenda. So this is the way music has connected the world. In our country, we say, Swar hi Ishwar hai. So music has connected the world, and the value of blessings, आशीर्वाद की value कुछ समझते हैं, कुछ नहीं समझते हैं. तो vibrations, the आशीर्वाद, good wishes from people, आशीर्वाद, love, that's very important. And this is what a great contribution of my wife Subbalakshmi ji in the life of Aman and Ayan, that Aman and Ayan fortunately could complete the school and also side by side practicing. But after they completed the school, I told them, if you want to be a musician, then no more studies. There's no need for college. So they decided that. So one has to surrender yourself. You can't have everything in life. It's not possible. Somewhere you lose something. So classical music is almost like entering into a dark tunnel with the hope of sun ray someday. रोशनी की तलाश. वो रोशनी किसी को मिल जाती है और बहुत सारे लोग उस रोशनी की तलाश में ही रहते हैं. तो it's a long journey, but it's almost like elephant walk. You have to walk with dignity, with grace. One has to be tolerant and patient to achieve your goal of life. तो violence इतना बढ़ गया आजकल all over the world. It's very sad that in 21st century we are still killing each other on account of religion. This is very, very sad. So what is the contribution of education? We have to redefine the meaning of education. How can a PhD be radical? How can a PhD be communal? Thank God I live in the world of sound. Swari Ishwar, as I've said many times, that I feel connected with God through music.
Sir, have you ever attempted Carnatic compositions or new ragas?
I am the only North Indian musician who got chance to offer North Indian music at the Tyagaraja Samadhi. And when I got the chance of visiting Tyagaraja Samadhi, I contacted Mr. Vagish, and Vagish ji brought a big dictionary of kritis of Tyagaraja. But one song in Raga Shri Ranjani, Soga Suga Mirdanga Talumu, I still remember the words. Tyagaraja is praying to Lord Rama, is it possible to understand the meaning of these 7 notes in this lifetime? Beautiful appeal. And I was moved. I said, I must play this kriti. So this is the kriti with the help of Mr. Vagish I performed in Tyagaraja Samadhi. And Tyagaraja, Purandar Dasa, Muthu Swami Dikshitar, Shama Shastri, Swati Tirunar, they were saints. They were pillars of music, like our Swami Haridas and Mia Tansen. So classical music still surviving, still alive because of the blessings of all these pillars of music.
I am Professor A.K. Tandon. I had been in Mangalayatan University. I would like to ask you, is there any other instrument which you tried or you laid your hands on?
It all depends. But for my interest, I learned tabla, I learned vocal music. But I always wanted to be a sarod player only. I should not divert. कि मैं सितार भी बजा लूँ, sarangi भी बजा लूँ. It's a great honor and privilege to be here in All India Radio World Service. And my father used to broadcast. I used to come as a young boy with my father from Gwalior. So I'm very happy and honored to be here.